Welcome back, friends. It's Anders. Today, I'm going to show you a sure way to improve your cocktail. It's not to say it's guaranteed to actually be an improvement, but by definition, it will be improved. If this sounds confusing to you, stick around. I will clarify what an improved cocktail is, how the improved cocktail gave us the old fashioned, show you how I workshopped the improved whiskey cocktail, and by the end of this video, you'll have an improved recipe to try for yourself. So, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button for more sips, tips, and recipes, and let's go make an improved cocktail. To the bar. Quick disclaimer, there is a good chance I will be using air quotes a lot throughout this episode. That's because when I say improved cocktail, I don't mean that it's actually better than the original. In the late 1800s, the early days of cocktails, improved was a specific addition to the drink, as in you would add it to the drink. And I'll tell you what that was in just a second. Back then, the original build for a cocktail was a base spirit mixed with sugar, bitters, and water. Sound familiar? I hope so, because that is the exact template for an old fashioned. Back then, the old fashioned wasn't called that. It was just a cocktail. The old fashioned became the old fashioned because of the improved cocktail. Jerry Thomas, the father of American mixology, was the one who created the improved cocktail and first referenced it in his updated Bartender's Guide in 1876. It was actually an appendix to his Bartender's Guide, which came out in 1862, but that's just some finer detail. According to Jerry, improved meant to add a small amount of maraschino liqueur and absinthe to a standard cocktail. In there, he also had instructions for an improved brandy, whiskey, and gin cocktail as well. And they all had the same addition of maraschino, liqueur, and absinthe. Personally, I think he was just trying to coin the term improved for cocktails. He did a similar thing with the word fancy and fancy cocktails, but that's for another video. Unfortunately for Jerry, his rules for an improved cocktail never really stuck. Take, for example, the improved Japanese cocktail. In that recipe, Toby Cecchini improved the original by switching out the bitters and adding lemon juice. Not only completely changing the style of drink, but also not adhering to Jerry Thomas's definition of improved. To be fair, that was actually an improvement on the original Japanese cocktail. But probably the biggest impact improved cocktails had was giving the old fashioned its name. Remember how I said earlier, we got the old fashioned because of the improved cocktail? Not everybody preferred the new improved cocktails. So they started ordering their drinks made the old-fashioned way, with just spirit, sugar, bitters, and water, aka old-fashioned. It's kind of like Coca-Cola Classic. Coca-Cola was just Coca-Cola, but then they came out with new Coke. Well, everybody wanted the original recipe, so they brought it back as Coca-Cola Classic. It's kind of like that. The most common of the original improved cocktails still made today is the improved whiskey cocktail. This is the cocktail I am going to show you how to make today. And it's really tasty. So, as usual, I workshopped this recipe to my liking to deliver you the best specs possible, and here's how I did that. Before we jump in here, there are a few things to consider when making an improved whiskey cocktail. First, the whiskey. It's common to use bourbon, but I went with rye. And of course, maraschino liqueur and absinthe are required as the improved component. I used a dasher bottle for the absinthe because we're only using a small amount here. As I mentioned earlier, the improved whiskey cocktail is basically a modified old fashioned. I like using a demerara syrup in my old fashions because it has a rich toffee flavor, but I didn't want that interfering with the additional flavors, so instead I'm using a semi-rich simple syrup made with plain white sugar. For the bitters, Jerry Thomas said to use Boker's or Angostura, which are very different. I wanted to compare these two bitters while keeping everything else in the cocktails identical. And I like them both. The Angostura version had a more familiar taste to me and was closer to what I associate with an old fashioned, but I actually preferred the Boker's here. Kind of reminded me of root beer, and the change was refreshing. The absinthe and maraschino were soft but noticeable. So sticking with the Boker's bitters for round 2, I doubled both the absinthe and maraschino to test where my limits were. And I didn't think that it made the drink any better, so I scrapped that idea. Finally, for curiosity's sake, I tried using demerara syrup instead of the simple, and it wasn't bad, but I thought the flavors were starting to get a little muddy, so the winner for me was my original ratios with Boker's bitters and plain simple syrup. I will tell you the exact recipe that I worked out in just a minute, but first, the booze. To make this recipe, we'll need rye whiskey, Boker style bitters, maraschino liqueur, absinthe, simple syrup, and a lemon. Okay, so the base, whiskey. Most likely, rye whiskey would have been used in the late 1800s, and I like using rye when I'm mixing with absinthe. Bitters is very important in a classic whiskey cocktail. I'm using Fee Brothers Cardamom bitters, which is a Boker style bitters. See, It says Boker's style right underneath cardamom bitters. That's because cardamom is one of the main flavors in Boker style bitters. If you only have Angostura bitters, that'll be fine, but it will be different. Also, some people will use Peychaud's bitters. Not saying that's not gonna work, but then you're getting mighty close to a Sazerac. Now, from what we've learned today, we know that together the maraschino and absinthe improve this cocktail. So that's why we have them here. The simple syrup is semi-rich, so it's 1.5 parts sugar to 1 part water. And then the lemon is for the oil in the skin. Let's build. Okie dokie artichoke. We're gonna stir this cocktail, and it's gonna be served in a lowball glass. If you want, you could serve this on the rocks, but I am not. I'm doing it in a small Gibraltar that is ice cold. So let's start with the whiskey. 2 ounces of rye whiskey. To that, 1/4 ounce of semi-rich simple syrup. Now the bitters, 3 dashes of your Boker style bitters, but if you have a small dasher bottle like this, double up, so 6 dashes. That'll do. Now for the improvements, we'll do a bar spoon of maraschino liqueur. This is gonna be about 5 milliliters. Not all bar spoons are created equal, so if you have a really large bar spoon, don't use all of it. Excellent. Now, you can just drop the spoon right in because we're gonna end up stirring this anyway. Now we can add the absinthe, and this is just a very small amount. I'm gonna add 1 dash or 2 from the smaller dasher bottle. If you really like absinthe, you can add a little bit more, but I do think it's always a good idea to start with less, and you can add more if you need to. Let's say 1 to 2 dashes of absinthe. And now all we have to do is add ice and stir. All right, give this the usual 30 seconds or so. More or less. I usually go a little bit more. I've got very hard ice. Now we can strain that off into a chilled glass and express lemon oil across the top to help keep things bright. Hit the sides, and you could toss this or garnish with it if you'd like. I'm gonna give it the Sazerac treatment. My Sazerac, I like a peel of lemon just on the side, but not dropped in. This is actually the same glass that I make my Sazerac with as well. There we have the improved whiskey cocktail. Cheers. This all up. It's what I love about this cocktail, probably my favorite thing, is it is interactive. We don't need this. Cheers. It's really nice. Really soft, a subtle sweetness, like an old fashioned. I like the switched bitters. I think that is really nice. I will say the absinthe and the maraschino are subtle. So if you want more of those, go right ahead. I do think that maraschino can overpower a cocktail though. And obviously absinthe can as well. So if you want, you can carefully add more. Is it improved? That's subjective. I like it a lot. I also really like an old fashioned, and I think that is pretty cool that the old fashioned is called the old fashioned because of this cocktail. So tell me in the comments down below, are you an old fashioned person or are you an improved person? I hope you enjoyed learning about the improved cocktail. If you did, check out another video on the monumental classic known as the Sazerac. Or you could watch this video, which YouTube thinks you're gonna like watching next. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Don't forget your merch. I will see you next time. Cheers.